Traffic jams at DRIVETEST centers, but congestion could clear with help on the way. As cases continue to rise, burnout hits area hospitals, with one CEO worried about what's next. Take a live look outside. Absolute scorcher today, 40 with the humidex right now. A heat warning in place for Windsor, Essex. Colette Kennedy with the full forecast tonight. I'm Chris Hensing. Thanks for joining us. We've seen it in Windsor this summer. Flooding after big storms, sunsets through the hazy smoke of wildfires from up north. A lot of what we're already seeing is predicted to only get worse. A new UN climate change report warns that we are in need of a radical change in order to protect our environment. CBC's Jennifer Lagrassa joins us now live. Jen, you spoke with people trying to make change. What do they make of all this?
Chris, the people that I spoke with are advocating for the environmental health of Windsor, Essex every day, from reducing our carbon emissions to the wellness of our lakes and our skies. And their efforts are needed now more than ever. That climate change panel from the UN, their report says that we need a big reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions. Otherwise, we're going to have severe consequences from global warming. Now, that report states that the planet has already warmed almost 1.2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. The climate change panel is calling on government to reduce emissions so that warming is limited to 1.5 degrees. Now, there are a few reasons why local environmentalists are pushing to do more.
Youth Advisory Committee is working on getting Lake Erie personhood status. This would mean that Lake Erie would have personal autonomy, or in other words, the rights of a human being. This is important because it teaches people the Indigenous belief that the water has life and should be treated as such. This is also important because knowing that the water has life should refrain people from harming the lake. As Indigenous people, it's our inherent right to respect and protect the lands, waters, and airs of the earth. And although we have less than 1% of access to those lands and waters, we need to take care of them so they can be here for the next 7 generations to experience and enjoy the same as we do.
Reuse, recycle, that's a very big part of what we do. And we do that for the climate. We also do that simply to be good neighbors and to be good, sustainable citizens in our city. In the city of Windsor, it's a little bit of a challenge to be promoting bicycle use for everyday transportation. I hear very often that we're a car city, but you know, our privileged position, relying on pickup trucks and cars and SUVs to get us places, has turned our planet upside down. I mean, the world is burning and we need to do something. So on an individual level, I think people are looking for something to do for climate change. And what we're encouraging people to do is for a short trip to choose a bicycle or walking for that short trip.
Basically doing a presentation from RASC about light pollution, and that we wanted to do something about the greenhouse situation because it was affecting not only astronomy but a lot of other things. So this was not just light affecting, you know, view of the stars, but also had an effect on Point Pelee, about nature, and a whole bunch of things. If you've never seen the Milky Way or understand that there's something bigger than us, we're not the center of the universe here. We kind of start thinking that way. We've narrowed our vision down to a very narrow perspective. I think we need to have that feeling of where we are in the universe, our place in the universe. And maybe with that thought, we'll start taking better care of where we live and what we do with what we live in.
Jen, some thoughtful comments on what's happening, what needs to happen next, but how do these ideas become actions?
Well, Chris, it's really a combination of responses, from local government stepping up to people changing their everyday habits. A light pollution bylaw, something that the city doesn't have, is a possibility. Bike Windsor Essex really wants to see the city act on their active transportation plan, bringing that infrastructure into the city for cyclists. And in general, it's just about people being more mindful of their parklands and their waters. Chris.
Thanks, Jen. CBC's Jennifer Lagrassa live tonight. Getting a driver's license in Ontario has been a challenge. The province has a backlog of 700,000 driver's tests, and that's because the centers were closed during the pandemic. Part of the solution, open temporary drive test offices. But as Dale Molnar reports, none are being planned for our area. But more testers, they're coming our way.
People have been waiting up to 8 months for a driving test to get either a G or a G2 class license. It's causing prospective drivers angst because time is running out on their temporary licenses.
It's very hard because my G is expiring, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to take it, and then if I have to redo my whole test all over again from the G1.
It's affecting it because every day I have to pay so much money to get to point A to point B from work, from the college, and it's just costing so much money that I don't know how long I'll be able to pay for it anymore with prices going up. I would like them to be able to expand the amount of employees for we're able to get in when we're able to without our license expiring, so we're able to actually go get our license.
The owner of a driving school agrees more resources are needed.
I don't think the opening many locations is the solution to this, honestly. Hiring more examiners, having the manpower to run or conduct more road tests is the solution, I believe, here, in my opinion.
A spokesperson for the Ministry of Transportation says they will be hiring 17 new examiners for drive test centers in London, Chatham-Kent, Sarnia, and Windsor. They are part of 167 temporary drive test examiners the province is hiring across Ontario. They expect to be ready in the fall. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
Windsor Essex is again seeing a double-digit increase in new COVID-19 cases. Today, there were 20 more reported, now 145 active cases. Of those, about 30% involve variants of concern. 2 people right now are hospitalized. We've been warned about a potential fourth wave, told by doctors that vaccines play a big part in avoiding one. I spoke with Janice Cafford today. She's president of Hotel du Grace Healthcare. She says staff, they're already burnt out.
It's not ending. It's continuation and continuation. And, you know, the staff are tired. We're having some difficulty in recruiting some vacancies. We're having a lot of sick call-ins, and that makes the whole fatigue worse, right? And I think now that there's been time to kind of rest a little bit, we're starting to see people reckoning with the cost of this anxiety and this worry that we've all felt for 18 months.
How do you feel about having to lead them through a potential fourth wave?
Well, I had hoped it would be over by now. I had hoped that we would be in the phase that we've been planning for, the recovery piece, right? Getting back to normal operations, being able to have our beds full, being able to receive patients from Windsor Regional that are having scheduled surgeries again. And, you know, all of the things that happen in a normal course of events here at Hotel du, but we're so far from normal. Our occupancy levels are low. As I said, our sick time is up. Our staff are worried. The virus is constantly evolving. And, you know, this Delta variant is very worrisome. And I'm worried, I guess. I guess the best thing to say is I'm worried. I'm worried about all of us and our ability to continue. Nurses and healthcare professionals across the healthcare system have been characterized as heroes, and I've talked about this before. And I think when a community characterizes their health workforce as heroes, it allows us to ask more of them than we ask of ourselves, right? So if you think of heroes and superheroes, they're able to do more than the average person can do. I don't think that's fair. I've never thought it's fair. I think that our healthcare teams across the province, we need to be looking after them. We have an obligation to them. We've asked a lot of them. Have we asked too much? I don't know. I don't think if you asked anybody if we've asked too much, that many of them would say that. They would say, I did my job, I met my responsibilities, I wanted to help, but they also have a realistic expectation that we'll be there for them when this all ends and we'll be helping them, right? So, you know, I think staffing levels are very lean across my hospital. I don't know about every other hospital, I can only speak for my own. We have difficulty recruiting some of the vacancies. So I think there are some things we need to do. So we're starting to think about that. We've thought about that a lot. And we had planned to start implementing some of these wellness initiatives thinking this was over, and it's not over yet. I think there will be a reckoning at some point, Chris, but I honestly don't know what that reckoning will be.
And she says one of the best ways to help from a community perspective is to get vaccinated. The Public School Board says 2,000 students will continue to learn from home. About 1,400 in elementary schools will learn virtually, 600 secondary school students. They're looking at high school courses and will decide whether it will be a hybrid model, virtual school, or e-learning. As for the Catholic Board, they say 3% of elementary students and 9% of secondary students will stay with at-home virtual learning. The Ontario Long-Term Care Association is calling on the government to make COVID vaccines mandatory for all healthcare workers.
We need to make sure that we have all of the tools mobilized to keep everybody safe. One of those is ensuring that everybody's vaccinated. So it's not just about protecting our residents, but it's also about protecting our workforce.
They want vaccines to be mandated in all healthcare settings because they're concerned if vaccines are only mandatory in long-term care homes, staff could leave for other healthcare jobs. They said while almost 90% of staff are fully immunized, it's important to close that gap. But today, the Ontario Minister of Health says the province will not mandate vaccination.
We know that many hospitals have already put in place measures to ensure that for those healthcare workers that do not receive the vaccines, that they will be tested on a very regular basis to make sure that they are healthy and that their entry into the hospital or wherever their place of work is, if it's a long-term care home, won't jeopardize the residents. So hospitals are already dealing with that, but we aren't proposing to make it mandatory.
Elliott also saying that the province has no plans to introduce a proof of vaccination certificate. New cases of COVID-19 creeping back up even as more regions ease restrictions. It's overwhelmingly the unvaccinated people who make up the growing caseload. Meanwhile, the rate of those who've had at least one shot appears to be plateauing around 71% of the population. Health experts say a fourth wave is very likely if we don't ramp up the vaccine rollout. Vicadopia reports.
As COVID-19 cases tick back up, even fully vaccinated people aren't taking any chances. In just a month, the number of people showing up here for tests has quadrupled, and a greater percentage are testing positive, driven by the more transmissible Delta variant. The average daily case count is back up to where it was in June, and the upward trend is happening sooner than it did last year. On average, twice as many people are testing positive than last August, and the trend is being led by BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan.
We know the way this virus behaves. We know that once we start seeing increased cases, that direction of case growth isn't going to change unless we change something.
In Alberta, pediatricians are calling for that change with new public health measures, as cases have gone up since the province opened up.
We've also seen in Louisiana, where pediatric hospitalizations have been rapidly rising, that they've reinstituted indoor mask mandates in the state. And so we need both monitoring measures as well as some mitigation measures.
It's adult Canadians who haven't been vaccinated that make up 90% of new cases. The latest figures show they're also the ones most likely to be hospitalized or die. But there is optimism. History doesn't have to repeat itself this wave.
It's about what can we do fast to increase vaccine uptake, which pretty much is around some type of vaccine mandate or COVID certificate or something along these lines, to quickly move, a relatively large chunk of individuals who are indifferent or hesitant to action.
Action now to prevent worse outcomes later. Vicadopia, CBC News, Toronto.
This week, fully vaccinated Americans were welcomed back into Canada. But that's not the same for those flying in from India. Ottawa announced it will once again extend its ban on direct passenger flights from India. The ban, which was first put in place on April 22nd, now scheduled to end September 21st. The government still plans to reopen Canada's border to fully vaccinated travelers from the rest of the world on September 7th. 3 more First Nations are launching an investigation into the fate of students who attended a residential school. They'll be examining the former St. Paul's Residential School in North Vancouver. The announcement coming on the same day the federal government pledged another $83 million to aid in those kinds of projects. CBC's Karen Pauls has the story.
Led by the elders, leaders of 3 First Nations announced they've begun the search for unmarked graves.
Our intention here today is to begin a healing process
Built in 1899 and run by the Catholic Church, for decades it was overcrowded and described as a fire trap. There were suspicions that children weren't being fed properly, and there was a smallpox epidemic. The school was condemned and closed in 1959. A new Catholic high school now stands on the site.
It's not located on an Indian reserve like many of the other residential schools, and it's also gone through significant development over the last 70 years since the school closed down. So there's a lot of pieces of disturbance and changes that have happened to the site that would make the investigation a little bit different than other sites that have shared discoveries.
We're standing right here.
Willie Nahenny is trying to help. He was forced to attend here for 10 years before going to school at Kamloops.
I think it'll be resolution to their families. It's like finding your lost child. Your heart starts to heal again.
All this as the Liberal government announced new money to search for unmarked graves, create a national monument, and manage the sites of former residential schools.
As a country, we know the truth. Once you know the truth, you cannot unknow it.
For many residential school survivors, sites like this one are sacred. They want the memories of those who didn't survive to be remembered and honored. Karen Pauls, CBC News, North Vancouver.
Take a live look outside where it is hot. That heat warning still in effect for Windsor as that temperature stays pretty high. Colette Kennedy tells us how hot it got today and what it's going to look like tomorrow after the break. We've seen just about every bit of weather that you could in the past 24 hours. Last night, you may have woken up to some thunder, lightning, and rain. This morning, heat warnings, special weather statements were in effect earlier today. Those lifted, but still hot and humid day out there. Those heat warnings keep coming back in, back out. Colette Kennedy comes in now to make sense of it all. And that map behind you kind of says what we're dealing with, eh?
Yes, exactly, Chris. This is what we're dealing with currently, and that is the heat and the humidity. That's not going away. We have actually seen some changes and improvements with some of the other activity. Essentially, the severe thunderstorm watches, there are still some in play in the province, but they're into eastern Ontario from about Toronto over towards Ottawa in terms of what's happening there. And still there are some advisories for funnel cloud development, but here through Windsor and Leamington, through Chatham, Kent, Sarnia, London, we're talking about the heat and we're talking about it, how it feels. So yesterday I took you through the humidex and those kind of values and what they correspond with. So just another way to show you is how about the dew points? So kind of the moisture content and one way of looking at it of the air. So we get that at say 22, and how about Chatham, Kent at 25? Oh, you're beyond oppressive there in terms of, you know, how we kind of classify these things and your comfort. So not to make light of it, I do need to remind everyone, we do have to take it easy. Really feel for folks who work outside and don't have that much of a chance. So needing those breaks and staying hydrated is so important. So still holding in the 30s, 31 in Windsor. And the humidex values just really, really extreme here when we're seeing them at 40 or even above. Some of the active weather from earlier, but we're into an active pattern, so you kind of know it's going to be coming back, and we have the very buoyant air in place as well. So showing you some of the storms, again, back to the west of us. And so once again, we're going to be seeing kind of it coming in waves. So overnight tonight towards early tomorrow morning, a chance again of getting some storms coming through. All right, stop that at 9 a.m., roll it forward. And then we should do better tomorrow afternoon. There's still a chance that I put in for some scattered storms, but most of it should be east of us. However, another round will come in into Thursday morning. So that'll be something to be watching for, and then that should peel away. So just all the way through the week, and then by the weekend, we'll take another breather here and kind of get away from this. So 24, yeah, your overnight low, not low at all. Tomorrow, again, talking about seeing those temperatures in the low 30s, and then the humidex values 40 or above. So that heat warning is going to be with us through Thursday. Friday, things start to change late Friday, and there's the relief for you, Chris, for the weekend.
That'll be nice to see. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Specialty cut flowers are making a comeback, a blossoming industry during the pandemic. We'll take a look at that next. A Chinese court has upheld the death sentence of a Canadian man arrested for drug smuggling in 2014. Canada is condemning China's decision against Robert Schellenberg, calling it cruel and inhumane. One of the two other Canadians detained by Beijing, Michael Spavor, is also expected to hear a verdict in his case in a few hours. Beijing has accused Spavor and Michael Kovrig of spying. The two Michaels were arrested in December 2018, just days after a top Huawei executive was detained in Vancouver at the request of the U.S. Meng Wanzhou is fighting extradition to the States. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is resigning. The announcement comes a week after an attorney general's report concluded that the governor had sexually harassed 11 women who were current or former state employees.
In my mind, I've never crossed the line with anyone. But I didn't realize the extent to which the line has been redrawn.
Cuomo insisted there was no sexual harassment and the information in the report wasn't credible or factual, but he apologized to the women. He said he knew he had truly offended. The three-term Democratic governor will leave office in 14 days. Now, during the pandemic, people's interest in gardening blossomed even further. It may have helped grow an industry that's relatively small here in Canada, specialty cut flowers. Now, that includes plants like lilies, sunflowers, and others with really long stems. The CBC's Jesse Anton shows us domestic flowers hold some advantages over cut flowers that are traditionally imported.
Barb Stefanish Cote runs Black Fox Farm and Distillery outside Saskatoon. They grow 250 varieties of cut flowers at their U-Pick farm, but it wasn't always easy. She says things like educational resources have really evolved since they first started 9 years ago.
And if I was going to grow wheat or barley or canola, there are thousands of people in Saskatchewan that I could ask, what is the best time to plant? When do I harvest? How do you fertilize? Not very many people in Saskatchewan knew at the time when is the best time to plant a zinnia.
The Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers has about 150 Canadian members.
People are thinking more about where flowers are coming from, and they're starting to realize that the cool flowers that we can have, that we can grow here that aren't ones that ship well.
Megan Roof is one of them.
Our snapdragons are ready to go.
This summer, Roof started Hatch Flower Farm, growing both in her Regina backyard and on 1/8 of an acre outside of town.
And the advantage to that is they're fresh. I can harvest mine 24 to 48 hours before giving them to someone. They're very fragrant. That's something that you lose during transport. And they last longer in a vase.
Another advantage, Roof says she's been able to beautify her neighborhood with her back alley flower patch.
It's just a great way to connect and meet your neighbors. And actually, I've given a number of tours of my yard, just meeting people in the alley. I've brought them into the yard and showed them the rest of the garden.
Many are wanting the wildflower Instagram aesthetic over the more traditional, like roses. And cut flowers offer that and a smile.
Flowers are pretty much happiness in a bouquet.
Jesse Anton, CBC News, Regina.
We've seen some of those subscription services popping out here in Windsor, Essex as well. That's it for us at CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, you can go to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. We're on social media too. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The Rick Mercer Report is up next. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.